let me invite, and I'll then introduce my distinguished guests. So, Mrs. Izabela Olszewska, the member of the management board of the Warsaw Stock Exchange. Ms. Katarzyna Szwarc, High Representative of the Polish Ministry of Finance, responsible for the implementation of the capital market development strategy. We are also having Mr. Robert Sochacki, CEO of the Beta Securities, the Polish ETF issuer. Mrs. Ewa Mazurkiewicz, a very experienced lawyer, head of capital markets and one of the leading Polish law firms, who was involved in the issuance of the first Polish exchange-traded funds. And last but not least, Mr. Maksymilian Skolik, director of the mBank brokerage house. mBank is a partner of our conference. Very good to have a chance to improvise. Why don't we start with our stock exchange then? And so the world is moving forward, and ETFs are becoming more and more popular. And we see that here even by the size of our conference. That is growing year by year. And we see a real interest from both institutional and individual investors. But maybe it's not obvious for everyone. Why are ETFs and passive investment vehicles in general so important for the stock exchange, for our indices, and possibly for our economy as a whole? And I would like to ask this question to Mrs. Izabela Olszewska. If you could give us the stock exchange perspective and possibly also the market perspective on that.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for this question. So, yes, of course, as the representative of Warsaw Stock Exchange, I would be more than happy to provide you with the perspective of our stock exchange, and maybe I will look also a little bit globally, and I present my opinion from the perspective of the capital market in Poland. So, as we could hear about the ETFs, there are very good instruments, and we can see that the growth of the interest in ETFs. We have 9,000 different ETFs listed worldwide, and I would say that the asset under management, they grow rapidly. So as Warsaw Stock Exchange, we compete a lot about the interest of investors, both categories, or maybe three categories of investors. So retail clients, institutional, local institution, and the interest of global investors. And we can see that the world currently is fully electronic and global, and our investors, they can trade on other stock exchanges. Also, it's very open for retail clients to invest abroad. So it's absolutely normal that as a platform in Poland, we would like to have the good palette of our products, of financial instruments, and keep the local capital, and also encourage the global capital to be on our platform. So this is the first reason, as we would like to promote ETFs because we can see that the experience globally is that the investors, they are more and more invest in this kind of instruments. This is the perspective of the investors that are currently with us, but also in Poland we have only 1,600,000 accounts. So comparing to the huge number of Polish citizens, we can see that we have the potential to bring the completely new investors to the capital market. And in my view, ETF could be first instrument for these categories of clients who are maybe not experienced enough or not educated enough to just invest in a concrete company or stock, or I don't mention here derivatives or other advanced instruments. So I think that it could be a very good instrument for also for the beginners. For the institutional investors, of course, we can also observe the increasing interest of our local funds, especially also pension funds that can invest in different ETFs. So our interest to have all these instruments here on our platform. The other perspective is more global, and we can see, for example, from the example of Israel, and maybe the representative of Beta Securities will explore this topic more, but we can see that the ETFs, they have the very good impact on the whole capital market and the whole stock exchange. Because if you have the ETFs based on Polish indices, and we have some of them, so every movement, so I mean the creation or redemption, it is connected with the movement on the real stock. So I think that having a vibrant market of ETFs for sure will help with building the liquidity on the stocks which are included in the indices being the underlying for ETFs. So from this perspective, we think that this is absolutely the interest of Warsaw Stock Exchange to promote this kind of instruments, and we've been involved in promoting for a couple of years. Of course, as it was already mentioned by the moderator, and probably will elaborate this in the couple of minutes, we have some barriers in our legal framework, but we would not want to defend, and we try to create the best possible framework for these instruments in Poland.
Thank you very much. I'd be eager to move to Biura right now, but since we mentioned Mr. Robert Sochacki and Beta Securities as the local issuer, we've got quite a few individual investors following us at the moment, and maybe it's not obvious to everybody. How does it actually happen that an ETF is such an important instrument from the perspective of its structure, of its performance? We all know that by definition it requires a market maker, so there are several trades following a trade on an ETF. What is your perspective as a person who structures this instrument, having also the local background of how you're doing it here?
Thank you. First, good that we didn't change the language of the previous panel to Polish.
We were almost there. You were almost there.
Okay, so next time Thomas is speaking Polish. Okay. First, I think to answer directly your question, ETFs, similarly to derivative instruments, since they have very strong connection with the cash market, the turnover on ETFs generates few times more turnover on the cash market. First, if someone is buying an ETF, let's say 1 million, then you have market maker that is selling it, must hedge itself, so there is another 1 million that is done on the cash market in the moment that the market maker is selling the ETF to the investor. Then, when there is a creation at the end of the day, again, the market maker is selling the hedge in the market and creating the ETFs, and the ETF provider or the fund itself is hedging itself, so it's buying the underlying asset to invest money. So it's effectively it's 4 times the turnover of the ETF. That's the effect on the turnover on the stock exchange. There might be slightly different scenario if you have in-kind creation, but let's not get too much into details. Generally, at least in case of our market, and the standard on our market is a cash creation, you have 4 times the turnover on ETFs, the turnover on the cash market. So it's highly effective or profitable, or I don't know how to call it, type of transaction for the stock exchange and for the investors, for the liquidity on the market. So, so ETFs have certain characteristics that are much different than just trading stocks. And that's one thing, but I think even more important is the fact that if you have ETFs introduced on your market, like in our case on the Polish market, WIG20 is liquid itself. So there is no special feature of ETF on WIG20. But if you have ETF on mWIG40 or SWIG80, which are mid caps and small caps, every creation results in, as I said, first buying the fund, some transactions to hedge from the market maker, and then at the end, the fund itself is buying stocks from all these individual companies. So we have small bits of liquidity in all the stocks that without ETFs were probably never touched, because the interest of the bigger investors concentrates on the most liquid parts of the market. So when we have active ETF market that covers not only large caps, but also small caps and mid caps, you have a little bit of liquidity in other parts of the market, which increases the attractiveness of the whole market. Because now, when you look at the ETFs that are available from iShares, for example, on Poland, MSCI Poland, you have either several companies that is less than 20 in one of these ETFs, and in the other one you have 20-something, or around 30, which is also only concentrated on the largest companies. So if we get to the point when ETFs on small caps and mid caps increase the liquidity on the other parts of the market, we will also see maybe the interest of the foreign investors that are dominating, at least at this point, they are dominating the local market in terms of turnover. Maybe we will see also them investing in other areas than just the large caps.
Thank you very much. If only we had a bit more of these Polish ETFs. And that leads me to another question. And for a brief introduction for our English-speaking guests that are not familiar with the Polish legal and regulatory system. As mentioned already, we're probably the only country in the EU that our ETFs are non-UCITS ones. And it's been and the situation has been dragging on for quite some time. That results in certain obstacles for them to develop, meaning obstacles for our markets and the smaller indices, as mentioned by Robert. I would like to ask Ms. Ewa Mazurkiewicz, on the legal perspective of that, where did it all begin? Why do we actually need to struggle with it? And why don't we really see an end to that in the near future?
Thank you very much for this question. When was this the beginning of the story? The beginning of the story was in 2004, or even earlier, when the provisions, as they are now, were started to be drafted. This was, as a matter of fact, the beginning of ETFs in Europe, because ETFs in Europe, as I know, however, I can be corrected by my colleagues,
they started to be traded at the beginning of our century, of our millennium. And that's the more or less time when our legislators started to draft our Polish provisions on Polish ETFs. They actually had some slight idea of ETFs in Poland, how they should work. They had this division between open-ended funds and closed-ended funds, and the funds that sell units which are not tradable and certificates which are securities and are fully tradable. And they decided, they could decide, that Polish ETFs should be created as closed-ended funds and issue certificates which can be traded on regulated market. Provisions regarding ETFs were very poor, I would say, and they more or less in the form they were drafted at the beginning, they are still in the same form. This is good and bad at the same time, because normally we could use those general provisions and could interpret them in a way to create normal ETFs, no matter this issue of closed-end investment fund not being a UCITS fund. However, you know, I can't say anything more that it's not really possible when you have an authority which interprets every provision in a very strict way. However, we have this general, very important problem with closed-end investment funds, because Polish law just says we have open-ended investment funds and closed-ended investment funds, no matter the features of the fund. European Union has some criteria which has to be followed to qualify the investment fund as open-ended or closed-ended fund. Moreover, UCITS is defined as the fund which gathers some funds from investors and then invests those funds into securities and other liquid assets as defined in the law, and diversifies risks related to those investments. So UCITS is defined in the law as the fund which gathers the funds from the investors and invests those funds into securities and other liquid assets defined by the law, and at the same time diversifies the risks related to those investments. That's all. What is stated in our law is stated that our UCITS is always open-ended investment fund. That's it. And every other fund is specialized investment fund, which is still open-ended. And all closed-ended investment fund, no matter the investment policy, is always alternative investment fund. No matter the redemption policy, no matter the investment policy, every time we have so-called, called by the law, closed-ended investment fund, we have the alternative investment fund. Most of our ETFs have the investment policy compliant with UCITS, have the redemption policy which is pursuant, which is compliant with the one defined as the adequate for the open-ended investment fund, why our ETFs cannot be UCITS if they are UCITS compliant, because they are qualified by the law as closed-ended investment funds. That's the only reason. There is another consequence. According to the prospectus regulation, this regulation shall not be applicable to any other collective investment funds, let's just skip this collective thing, other than the close-ended. Should not. But how we should find out whether the fund is closed-ended or open-ended? We should try to find out whether all those criteria are met. Not like in Poland, we should look at the law and try to find out whether the law specifies that our fund is named close-ended or open-ended. No, that's why we prepare prospectuses every year, go to our Polish authority to get the prospectuses accepted. That's because we have funds named by the law as close-ended. However, we have this continuous public offer. Okay, sorry. We have this continuous offering of our certificates. We have continuous redemption. We have investment policy, which is compliant with UCITS directive. And still, we have to make our prospectuses. That's why we say our ETFs, most of our ETFs, are UCITS. They should be UCITS. They should be treated like UCITS. And our investors should know that they are UCITS. It's not just terminology fight, because there are further consequences. If you are UCITS, you are not complicated instrument by law for distributor who is obliged to make adequacy for his clients, who is obliged to make product governance, selling instruments. The law treats UCITS completely differently from close-ended investment funds. Sorry, not close-ended, but alternative investment fund. Alternative investment funds are treated like risky instruments. That's why investors are not willing to invest their funds into alternative investment funds, even if they look like ETFs. Because ETFs, which are UCITS, are completely differently treated under any risk analysis. That's one consequence. Another consequence is when you have your investment limits. Investment limits are different for investments in UCITS and investments in alternative investment funds, even in Polish law. For instance, for investment funds, there are many consequences which are different for UCITS and for alternative investment funds. This is the essence of this fight. And like I said, the story began in 2004. Nothing really changed. We created 9 ETFs. We're still fighting for the change of law for those ETFs to be treated like normal UCITS, as they mostly are. That's more or less the story.
Thank you very much for this comprehensive description. So it appears that it's a very unfortunate mix of legislatory provisions and regulatory approach. But let's not lose focus here. And maybe I'll try to do a bit of a twist now. And so we've got this unfortunate regulatory situation. But from the practical point of view, and I see that we still have representatives of our partners here, can I ask some of you a question? Tomasz, if you don't mind. Does it make sense to you? I mean, you're doing this business, you're selling these funds. Does it make sense to you that an ETF is non-UCITS and that this is a closed-end investment fund?
I've been trying to be really honest the whole afternoon today, so I will keep at that. I don't really understand it. I still don't understand it. I'm really struggling with the rationale, but maybe it's not only Poland relative, but European Union. Because we have got a kind of a financial union, European Union with a, I would say, guidelines on ESMA, on UCITS, on different regulations. And still we have the regional implementation on a completely different level than what I think the idea of this legislations I think meant to have to be. Poland is completely different from everybody else, and that's maybe making our lives really hard to understand that and to move in this direction. And as what I have heard also from the competition, it wasn't really easy to kind of get access to the market in terms of really offering the products here also in the retail space. So I don't think it's a really good answer, but it's at least what I'm struggling with still.
Thanks very much so much. Yes, indeed, we should congratulate Bahram of introducing 180 iShares funds to the Polish register. So yeah, the only word that comes to my mind in English is possibly conundrum to describe what we're challenged with right now. But maybe there is a light in the tunnel, or at least we've been thinking there was, as we've got quite advanced legislation introducing the changes related to the implementation of the capital market development strategy. And this is for our English speaker to, just so you know, several years ago, European Bank for Reconstruction and Development with the representatives of the Polish government, I'm simplifying this a bit, came together to identify the most pressing problems for the Polish capital markets to develop. And ETFs legislation was one of them. And we are now, a few years later, we are having the relevant draft law being proceeded by the Polish Parliament. And initially, it included some very promising changes. And we were all hoping that the local ETFs will eventually be UCITS compliant. I understand it's changed a bit now, and this is obviously the question to Katarzyna Szwarc. If you could let us know where we are now and obviously what the prospects are for the near future.
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. And first of all, let me thank you very much for the invitation. I'm really incredibly happy to be here. To be honest, when I reflect on the first days at the Ministry of Finance when I took office, people kept asking me, okay, so we've got all those huge challenges ahead of us, like we need to improve on financial education, we need to build better mechanisms that can help us translate savings into investments like pension funds, etc. But these obviously will bring us impact in 10, 15 years. Are there any quick wins that we can have, that we can really show the market that the strategy is working? And I said, yes, of course, ETFs. It's look, the trend is so big that even politicians have noticed. We see that investors are really, really interested. We see that the solution is cheap, it's simple, it's transparent. It allows them to invest in what they most care about, like ESG, or what they are interested in, like gaming. So there is a lot of potential, and I fully support the stock exchanges and the Polish capital markets efforts into improve the situation. Now, as Eva shrewdly observed, we have this, let me say, challenging situation in the Polish law. I think the way I understand it is that when it comes from is that the Polish investment fund law actually precedes not only the European solutions, but also ETFs, which creates several challenges. First of all, it's challenging to adjust it legally, but we already had suggestions on how this could be done. So let's say that this challenge, we've overcome it. But the bigger challenge, the second challenge, is it creates this psychological barrier in the market amongst regulators, some policymakers, that we would need to classify ETFs that are for some reason considered closed-end funds in Poland as UCITS. Indeed, the initial version of the draft bill included some brave solutions that were quickly made subject to a wide debate, which ended in something that I guess we can call a compromise. Something that no one is apparently happy with, but apparently that is how you define success in the government. But it makes important steps towards actually easing the situation for ETFs here in Poland. So several regulatory obligations that are, I understand, a problem and a big cost to ETF manufacturers in Poland are being removed. So at least we're moving slowly, but we're moving towards this perfect model. The bill is currently, we have finished working on it at the Ministry of Finance. It's been submitted to the Chancellery of the Prime Minister, and we hope that within the next couple of weeks it will make its way to the Parliament, where it can be approved before the end of this term.
Thank you very much. So, what are these steps in particular, and does it mean can we be very hopeful or a little hopeful? Does it mean that we will have this UCITS label in the few weeks' time, few months' time, or does it mean that we will have some steps forward, but we are not quite there yet in terms of the UCITS sticker?
Well, so the UCITS sticker is not there. It's not in the draft bill. The way I see it is that we're taking important regulatory steps towards easing the situation for the Polish UCITS. Hopefully you agree with me, Robert. We are taking important steps towards actually changing the thinking around ETFs in Poland. And to be honest with you, I think it's just a matter of time.
I very much hope so, and this sounds reassuring. Thank you very much for explaining this. And this, at the end of the day, it is a bit of a good news, at least for now. I would like to park the issue of domestic investment funds for a little while, as we have still with us our partners today, and your funds are being offered to the Polish customers, not necessarily via our stock exchange, which is a bit of a shame, but are being distributed in several other channels, meaning, for example, mBank. And I kept Maksymilian Skolik silent for a little while, for which I apologize. But if you could tell us a little bit more, you've got a gigantic offer of ETFs and other exchange-traded products, over 400 instruments available to Polish investors. What are we've discussed trends worldwide, and we know what's going on more or less. How do you see the demand of Polish investors? Of course, being able to offer lots of instruments, it gives you lots of data. And are they all so popular, or do we, as Polish investors, concentrate more on some of them?
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for parking this difficult regulatory issue. And I'll be happy to concentrate on slightly more practical aspects. And Yes, we have been the first one in Poland to introduce foreign markets and ETF trading. And we've seen the development of the offer over the last few years. It's been a huge success, very dynamic growth. And I think it really started at the end of 2019 and speeded up in 2020 and 2021. I think that was where the most dynamic growth was. And yeah, preparing for that panel, I had a look at what our clients are interested in, and I would be happy to share some insight into it. So I had a look at top 20, 25 ETFs they trade, and it's retail clients. And I may say that approximately 17% of our retail client base already has exposure to ETFs, which I think is quite a lot given that we've been in the market for over 30 years. So this is not like a fresh client base. We've built that client base over many, many years. And we have seen very strong acquisition in those, let's say, pandemic years, 20 and 21. And these were like new clients. They were younger, definitely more prone towards investing overseas. And it seems that, like, you know, trading foreign stocks, single stocks or ETFs was not a problem to them. And we all know that, you know, there's this strong home bias when it comes to investing abroad. So it's really difficult to go over a certain level. But coming back to the offering, I think I can try to split it into 4 or 5 categories. So the first one would be ETFs giving very wide exposure to stock indices, like SWDA, for example. Maybe it rings a bell. It's the most popular one in our offering. And I think we have a few thousand clients with exposure to this one, definitely by far the most popular. I think it's based on MSCI World Index, if I'm correct. So developed markets, approximately 85% of coverage. Then there's like 2 more, I think. SPY5 is, for example, one of them. So basically the first category is ETFs that give you a highly diversified exposure to global markets, global stock markets. And the second group is, I would say, still ETFs giving you exposure to stock indices, but in a narrower meaning, like, for example, only to, let's say, China, or also very popular, I think it's Vanguard Lifetime 80-20, which is a split between equity and bond part of the portfolio. I think we also have, it's probably the second most popular, if I recall correctly, EMIM, EMIM, to be precise. It's emerging markets ETF, concentrated primarily in China and Taiwan. I think China is like 28%, Taiwan 17% or something like that. So it's also very popular. The third group, I would say, is commodities. That may be slightly surprising, given, like, you know, this is the passive investing conference, and yeah, but I think it's. I think we have like 2 groups of clients in this category. Clients that try to speculate, so it's like more, you know, shorter, medium-term speculation, and clients that want to have exposure to gold. As I should have said that earlier, gold is by far #1 in this commodity category. So altogether in the top 25, I think we have like 3 ETFs with exposure to gold. So, you know, still it's very popular. And I think, especially now in the high inflation environment, I think clients tend to, you know, flock towards safety they perceived, with having exposure to gold. And if I were to give, one advice to my colleagues from Beta, where they should be looking for the, best asset class that would be of interest to retail client, gold would definitely be one of them. So other positions in that commodity category would be silver, platinum. I think if I'm correct, oil was at the bottom, but oil is highly speculative commodity. So that would be category number 3. The next one would be thematic investing, and I think we had quite a few of them in the top 25, 10 or so. So, water, clean energy, cybersecurity, automation and robotics. So usual suspects, I would say. And that's not really what we have in mind when we think about passive investing, because these products may be perceived as speculative addition to your portfolio, giving you exposure to part of sectors or sectors that are only developing, and they have some inherent speculative nature in that. And I would highly recommend the thing that Michal had yesterday regarding thematic investing. You can watch it online if you haven't seen it yet. I highly recommend it. So there are some pitfalls to thematic investing, definitely, but it seems that clients like that attitude of having core portfolio and some satellite portfolios or parts of the portfolios that gives them additional exposure. And the final group, I think, is what we may call Warsaw Stock Exchange listed ETFs. Let's put it this way, because all the ones that I was discussing previously are available through foreign brokers, so a foreign markets offering. And in this last group, I think we had Lixor S&P 500, which is, if I'm correct, the oldest one, or maybe one of the oldest ones that we have. The oldest, yeah? One of the oldest, okay. And 3 beta ETFs for Big 20, MVIG, and I think the leveraged Big 20 was the last one. So yeah, basically, if I were to try to put them into categories, that would be those 5. And
thank you very much. I mean, this is very interesting because it means that Polish investors are actually tempted to have quite a diverse portfolio of products as well.
Yeah, definitely. So it's not concentrated in one group. I would say it's spread over very different asset classes, asset types, etc.
And life strategy that you mentioned is Vanguard. Yeah, very interesting. And a short follow-up question: commodities? Did you mean ETC commodities, investing in gold itself, or gold miners, equities, or both?
I think the 3 of them that I saw on the list were ETFs with exposure to either physical gold or exposure created by derivatives. But it wasn't miners, it was exposure to pure gold.
Pure gold, thank you. Yeah, so moving on to different distribution channels, because we've got our stock exchange, we've got brokers offering foreign products, but there is also a bit of a trend, at least on the local exchanges, and we see that in both Bulgaria, for example, that they open global markets and introduce foreign products to their stock exchanges. We don't have such a large offer for that at the Warsaw Stock Exchange yet, but possibly it's a very interesting and attractive distribution channel for the investors and for the exchange too. And this leads me to come back to Ms. Izabela Olszewska, to tell us what does it actually even make sense for investors to have these foreign UCITS ETFs available via our exchange? And what are the plans of the Warsaw Stock Exchange in this respect?
As the stock exchange, of course, I think that is absolutely obvious. We are interested in those ETFs who could be traded on our platform. And of course, on the one hand, it's just our business. But on the other hand, I think that we need to give to our investors I think the huge range of possibilities. So there are some of them, they want to trade abroad on foreign stock exchanges. Some investors, they come from abroad to us. So the world is connected, fully electronic, no problem. But I think that there are a group of investors, or maybe potentially new investors, who feel better on our local exchange. They want to trade in Polish currency, and they want to have the access through our local brokers. And I think that it makes sense also to have a range of ETFs here on Warsaw Stock Exchange. So every day with my colleagues, we ask ourselves the question, how we can achieve it. So what are the potential channels of bringing new ETFs to our platform? So first possibility is, of course, to develop the ETFs which are created on the basis of the Polish law, but and of course we support beta ETF and we just want them to develop the offer. But of course we could hear about some challenges and in our local legislation, and we need to overcome these barriers, and I hope that one day we'll manage to do this. So this is the one thing. The second thing is how to bring the ETFs which are created on the basis of the foreign law to our platform. And there are two, I think, possibilities. One is just to encourage the foreign providers to be our issuers, but it is a challenge. And what we've been observing for a long time, that the answer is no, we want to have this ETF listed and traded on the global exchanges, and we don't want to have, those ETFs and the liquidity spread on many exchanges. So the other possibility is to bring this ETF without, the whole procedure and the agreement of the providers, and this is possible. And a couple months ago, we opened our Global Connect market. Currently, we have just a few stocks, blue chips from Europe, which are offered to our clients. And of course, I think that this is, for us, the possible way how to also bring the foreign ETFs to our market. And a couple of years ago, I used to work for Acquis Exchange, which is the entity, the platform located in London and currently also in the EU zone. And they offered a lot of ETFs to our clients, like a multilateral trading facility, and they were very successful. Also, Marcin, you mentioned some other countries, like, for example, Bulgaria or Austria, and they have also such an offer to their investors. So currently, we are in the process of checking whether it is possible also in our Polish circumstances. But this is the third, I would say, channel for us to bring ETFs and increase the palette of ETFs on our market. What is the good news? That we managed to find outside the first interested ETN and ETC provider. and we are in discussion. This is the big name in Europe, and we are in discussion of them. So as soon as we have agreement with the market makers, so probably we'll have the first ETC and ETN products on our platform.
Thank you. So there's lots of interesting news ahead. We're running out of time, but I'd still like to ask a couple of maybe shorter questions. So Beta introduced quite a few interesting ETFs recently, and it's been quite of a journey. How do you see this advice you just got, Robert, to have the ETC fully physically backed gold instrument, which will not be possible under the Polish law for the moment, but hey, maybe gold miners for Polish or something similar, which is obviously a broader question of what are your plans now to develop and introduce a new instrument?
Sorry. Of course, we are looking at new products. We've introduced in 2021 5 new products. They are slowly gaining the assets. It's a challenge to fill the products with the assets that we have already, but we are looking at new possibilities, and definitely commodities is one of them, because we've introduced, the last one that we introduced was Polish government bond ETF, which is different asset class that we were doing so far. And again, it's not growing as good as I would imagine, but I think regardless of the speed of investing, we are here for the long time, and we will be introducing. The law changes or not, we will be introducing the ETFs, and we will not be discouraged by alternative funds or UCITS or whatever. So definitely we will introduce a couple of new funds. We will probably this year we will introduce them. We are looking at, of course, the big questions are which asset classes. The second big question is domestic or foreign indices. And definitely we see that there is a demand for thematics, for gold, but we also see that. Sorry.
Dividends.
Dividends. We see that, but we also see that there is, thanks to mBank, Bosch, and others, we see that there is access for Polish investors for this kind of ETFs from other providers that so far we treat as our colleagues and hopefully helping in development of the local ETF market. So I think there is enough room for us to focus also a little bit more on Polish market and Polish indices. We are working with GPW Benchmark, which is an index company of Warsaw Stock Exchange. And they are introducing new indices also for the Polish market. And we see also ourselves as providers of the solutions for the Polish investors. So with the Polish, let's say, or home bias, with the home bias of Polish investors, we see some opportunities for Polish indices. So I would guess that we should expect, or I think investors should expect, we should introduce something from the Polish market rather than gold that is already available, and investors like, for example, physical gold, and also possibility to redeem in physical gold, which is probably very difficult for us to replicate, so it doesn't really make sense. We see that there is a fight to be fought on the area of regulation that can invite, let's say, or make it easier for others to also issue on the Polish market. I would friendly disagree with Eva about what she said about that in 2004 it started and nothing has changed till now. We have one thing that has changed, which is we have Polish ETFs now. So we have verified the regulation that was done in 2004. So far it seems that we look at it in a way that if reality doesn't fit the regulation, it's worse for the reality, not the other way around. So we're hoping that at some point the regulator will understand that if we have some experience from the real life and real market developments, we should adjust the law to help the development, not the other way around. So we should, buy too small suit and try to fit it. We should rather make a new suit if it doesn't fit us. So I hope that this will be done because, however we like the global market to be present in Poland, we also should understand that in every European market, there is a strong home bias, and there was many surveys done on that, and in most of the instances, in majority of the investors never even think about investing abroad. We in Poland have a little bit skewed view because only 4% of Poles know what ETFs are. So we think that the behavior of Polish investors is kind of representative for the whole population, which is not. We have 4% of people that have brokerage accounts that are active on the stock exchange, and we cannot make projections on the basis of these investors with regard to the whole population. When we have 40 or 60% of people knowing what ETFs are, we will have completely different behaviors. We will see people investing in mVIG, SVIG much stronger than S&P 500. Although I love S&P 500 and I think it's a great index, and Americans and all the world loves it, I think majority of the Polish investors will be investing in small caps, mid caps, and large caps of Polish stock exchange. They will have certain part of their portfolio invested abroad, and hopefully it will be a big part. But I can't imagine that when we have 60% of Poles investing on the stock exchange, 60 or 70% of their money will be invested abroad. I think 60 or 70% of their money will be invested domestically, and only 30% will be invested abroad. So S&P will stay, or NASDAQ will stay as an important index. But if we get to people that are more representative for the whole population, I think we will be more focusing on the domestic market. And if we manage to grow the importance of stock exchange, importance of the long-term investing, we will also attract other issuers. I wouldn't exclude also those from abroad, to create ETFs in Poland on Polish indices if they manage to be important enough to attract foreign issuers and foreign investors. Now, the foreign investors invest in MSCI Poland, not WIG20 or mWIG40. But I don't know, maybe, as I said, we managed to change the market, the structure of the market, in a way to attract more investors, retail investors, to the market. We see Slovakia, we see Czech Republic, how they managed by incentives, tax incentives, to shift some of the savings from the banks to the stock exchange. And it's hard for me to imagine that in Slovakia you have more ETFs sold to retail investors than in Poland. That is the level of the challenge that we are facing.
Thank you very much. So there is obviously lots to be done, but we will have new beta ETFs, so I have an impression that I should keep on asking because each question brings some good news. And on that note, yesterday marked a very important day for the crypto enthusiasm and passive investors, because some of you may not have recalled that it was the first official exchange-traded product based on the MSCI crypto index was yesterday listed on Xetra. And this is a question that will surely be very important for lots of the individual investors that are watching us now, and that I would like to ask to Maksymilian's colleague. We're having this, and also like last Thursday was when MiCA got blessed by the European Parliament. Judging from not only the knowledge of the market and Polish investors, but also your entire investment experience, can we actually say that crypto is a new asset class? And if so, what is the chance of crypto-based products? Can we even still call them passive investment products, but exchange-traded products offering crypto exposures? What is the chance of them being available to Polish investors via any distribution channels, be that mBank or other brokerage houses? What would need to happen? What would need to change for this to happen?
So maybe if you don't mind, I can briefly comment on what Robert said just a while ago regarding his optimism towards Polish market. Unfortunately, I can't agree. I think that data that we have seen over the last many years, they show that Polish market does not produce good returns, and it's much better to invest abroad, unfortunately. And I think that the growth and the client interest will be concentrated in the foreign markets, primarily developed markets. And Polish market will definitely not be the first choice, and that is what we are seeing now. And I can't see how that would change, to be honest. So that's basically my comment too. And
it's good that there is at least one thing that we quite strongly disagree within the panels. It's energizing.
Okay, so...
but please, my crypto question first.
Okay, so going back to crypto, yes, definitely we have seen interest from the clients, and I think we would be offering that kind of products, but unfortunately there is no regulatory framework in Poland to support that, and we have seen the growth of such products in Germany. There is many of them listed on Xetra, and you have issuers that specialize in that kind of products, like CoinShares, I think, 21 Shares, if I recall the names correctly. And the offering is quite wide, and trading is growing, so definitely there is strong interest into it, but also there is regulatory framework in Germany that, lets these things happen. And definitely it's not the case here in Poland. And as you mentioned, the parliament accepted MiCA, but I think it's going to be towards the end of 2024 when it comes into life in the member countries. So I think we just, need to wait for the regulatory framework. And we have also, from the regulatory perspective, we have also heard what the regulator thinks about crypto, and I personally don't perceive that as, positive news, to be honest. So I think it's going to be, primarily wait and see approach till we have the regulations, and then hopefully we can satisfy the client's appetite for that kind of products.
Very well, thank you. So hopefully when the regulatory framework changes, then you'll be there to offer the products. This is good to know. I have one possibly final question, and this is, why don't we end up on the ESG note? This is a question I would like to ask Katarzyna Schwarz. Not everybody knows that she is also the well-regarded ESG expert and an author of first Polish publications on the green finance in central banking, as far as I remember. So if you were to comment also on the ETFs in the ESG sector. Of course, it's one of the thematics that we discussed today, but I hear from lots of people that when investing, they also want to make a bit of a vote and invest alongside the values. And maybe this is an instrument that could offer this to them. What's your take on that?
Yeah, absolutely, fully agree. As you know, at the Ministry of Finance, since last year, we've been working on a roadmap for sustainable finance development in Poland. The idea is to not make it a compliance exercise, but more to think how the Polish capital market can really develop on the basis of this new ESG phenomenon, on the back of the fact that Poland will need so much money for financing its just transition in the years to come. And in each meeting of working groups and the platform and the sustainable finance platform that we launched, we hear investment funds, including ETFs, are a way to do it. I think ETFs could be, and in many countries, global markets already are a smart way for investors to invest in what they care about: climate change, social issues, maybe ESG aspects, incorporating also the corporate governance. And I think I don't know. I'm sure you've noticed in the last couple of months there's been actually the number of ESG labeled ETFs have decreased. As a result of regulations coming into force, which actually enforced certain standards on what can be labeled as climate change friendly, as planet friendly, as green, or as ESG. And I think this is a really, really good phenomenon, because what this actually did was to make investors sure that the ETFs that the green or ESG or sustainability labeled ETFs that they invest in now, that are out there, really can help them make that impact they are looking for. So I think we're actually on a good track, and obviously fully agree that ETFs are a good instrument to drive that change.
And do you see appetite in Poland for that? We possibly are not quite there yet. Or are we?
There is one investment fund that follows the ESG index in Poland, and it's pretty big, 1.5 billion zlotys, which is for Polish standard big. The only problem is that it wasn't ESG when it was 1.5. It changed to ESG and it's still 1.5. So I don't think there is an impact of being ESG to big extent. I think it's just the inertia of the investors. But still, there is some interest or at least lack of dislike from the investors.
Well, you need to start somewhere, yeah?
Quickly ad votum, because
Please.
I think I do see that wine is being served there, and I would definitely not like to deprive our audience of it. But I think the main challenge at the moment in Poland is that we don't have low carbon benchmarks. But We are working intensely on this to change in the months or years to come. So definitely watch this space. I think they will make it much easier for Polish sustainability ETFs to be launched.
Thank you. Considering the wine, and not only, I will conclude this panel now. Thank you very much to my esteemed panelists. I hope it was very informing for our partners, and your desire to know what's going on in Poland in the passive investment sector is at least satisfied to an extent. Please, big applause to the panelists. Thank you very much.